Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We really do appreciate it. Hope you'll come back and join us later and tell your friends about us so that they can get some benefit from the modeling tips that we have. I now want to turn to Father Ron Walters for our evening prayer.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Ron. I really do appreciate everything that you do for our show. As you know, I've got two short announcements here. Modeling Lifestyle with Dan Walshon is tomorrow evening. Starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's only available live on our YouTube channel. But it's going to be a great show. I really think that you're going to enjoy it. Dan's got some great people that are going to be on with him. And the photos that you're going to see on that show are just outstanding. Also, I want to mention again our scholarship program. It's the final deadline for the application for people is July the 1st, 2023. And if you know of a graduating senior or someone who's just graduated from high school that's attending a college or a university in a science, technology, engineering, art, or math program, please tell them about our scholarship and see if they would be interested in joining us. And applying for it. It's only open to model railroaders. So the young man or woman would have to be a model railroader and have to participate in model railroading in order to apply. And we really think that this is going to be a great opportunity for one young individual. And hopefully in the future we can expand it and have it grow some. But if you know of somebody, please pass the message along to them. Now I'd like to turn to Philip Crew, who owns a company called Miniatures by Philip. I first found Philip on the internet because I saw one of his models and I was just intrigued. And I started talking to him a little bit and got more intrigued. And I think you will be too. So Philip, welcome.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Yeah, I was going to start out by showing some methods of making a brick. And this is an actual cement. Unfortunately, I started it too early. It's done kind of hard, but you can take a tool, even though it's this hard, it doesn't get too hard. You can draw stone. You want to try to get it fairly deep. I didn't do it deep enough to actually make it a 3D. And then you just go in and paint. On the brick, at this stage of hardness, I will use a hacksaw blade, and I'll try, depending on the scale you're wanting, just drag it across and just work it in freehand. And if it's more pliable, more wet, it's a whole lot easier to work with. And you can just either jog it out. I normally will take an air hose and just clean it out. And then I will take most anything, shish kebab stick and something, and just, as I did with the stone, just draw it in. And Tom, if you will show the Carter house, that is the actual, what I did earlier in the week. This is it. So the mortar joints are actually mortar. The base down here is just the natural color of the cement. And this is another little house that did the same way. Now, occasionally, I will carve the brick. Now, this is carved in with the Dremel and with the oscillator cutter, or actually with my bandsaw. I would do the horizontal lines with the bandsaw, and then I would come back in with the Dremel and do my vertical joints and they too need to be fairly deep. Generally, I'll go one full row because it gives it more of a 3D realistic effect if you get it down in there deeper. And then just paint the whole thing with the color of a gray that you want. Then I generally wipe off the excess because I'm just wanting to get it down in the mortar joints. And in this case, I used the cutter, and I just more or less I just freehanded this. It's kind of rough, and I just drew it through there. The easiest way to do it is if you've got a small table saw, I turn my blade to 45. I want as little bit of the blade as possible to actually be touching the wood. I just want to catch the corner. So I will start out about right here, depending on the size brick I want. And I start out about right there. And I would normally cut the first row just by pushing it through. Then I would move it over. I usually step it over, put me a mark to step it over, whatever size brick I want, run it back through there. You can actually do that pretty fast. And then you can take the Dremel. I did this one too fast. I got the lines a little bit close together, didn't cut the vertical lines deep enough really, but that gives you an idea of some ways of making some realistic brick or stone. If you're a good painter of stone, I just mixed up 3 shades of a red, more of an orange and a brown, and just painted a few of them in. This is not the stage you would want to paint it. The mortar is still real dark. The gray is going to change the color to it's go more muted. But that's kind of a couple of ways of doing brick that look very realistic. And the material I use, this is the only thing I have found that works. There's a lot of brands of patch. Lowe's carries a bunch, but they don't carry this. I find this at Ace. It has the right amount of cement and sand. The ones I get at Lowe's, yeah, it has too much sand. It's too gritty. You can't really work it out for real fine brick. And I'm kind of trying to remember where we wanted to go from here. Jim, you want to kind of direct me? Okay, I think let's go maybe talk about maybe shingles, for instance. You can always find old thrown away tar paper, usually at a building site or whatever. And I just take a utility knife and strip it down in the little strips, and I just glued it on. This was done last week, so it's gotten dirty in my shop. And then I will take, after I just use regular wood glue, I would take a knife, not a plastic knife like this, and I just go down and cut into it to make the tabs. I'd actually use the utility knife, not something like this. And that makes a real good, realistic. To get that color, it's just black. And I take a white paint and I'll just push that nozzle, after I shake it, I'll just push that nozzle till it just barely comes out. It's more or less just a sprinkling. And it will make it look like the sand, more or less, on a shingle. And what I do a lot of, and people are always asking me, well, how do you do your metal roofing? Well, I'm going to show you on that. I'm going to need my hacksaw blade again. In my table saw channel, I cut a piece of wood that was that wide that will hold. I put the dual side of the hacksaw blade if I can get it in. Okay. I want it to be down enough to. Now I use different material. Normally I have been always using metal, aluminum flashing, but my wrist is getting to where when I do the metal, it just, I'm keeping tendonitis. Lowe's also carries a vinyl with a coating of copper. And this makes a very good roof. And you can spray over it with red amber and with an etch. And you can just put your ribs however you want it, however close you want, and there's no stress or strain. Also, I use a vinyl, it fell off, that I get at Lowe's. This is a whole lot cheaper. And this is what the store is made out of. This is actually a vinyl. I have to fill up it sometimes to tell the difference. But you can just put the vinyl, and it's very easy to mold. Just pull it right down through there, step it over however far, pull it again. And I'm sure some of you can come up with a device that will do that a lot simpler than this, but it took me quite a while to come up with a way, an easy way and a fast way to doing my tin. I try to make everything on my buildings. I do my own gas pumps. I do my own window trim. I do my own signs. I have those printed on a bumper strip material. Then I stick them onto the metal and cut around them. Of course, I do all my own brick. I did this out of a sponge. So I generally 99.5% of what I do is it's things that I make myself. And I'm always learning new tricks. Lattice is one of the hardest things to make and make it look neat. And I had a building with a whole lot of lattice on it recently, and happened to remember I had some of the gutter guard I got from Lowe's. And so you can just paint it, and you can cut it with a good heavy pair of scissors, and it makes for a good lattice. So I'm going to see if there's some questions at this point.
Well, Philip, I've got some. When you and I were talking, one of the things that amazed me is that basically you take whatever's around and use it for your building. Whatever you think is appropriate, you'll figure a way to use that kind of material or that kind of piece of whatever and convert it into a model.
I do. Like last night, I built this old barn out of some old wood off of my barn down back.
Can you get closer to that so we can actually see it better? Yeah.
And this one was hard to work with on the framing of it because it is 150-something-year-old chestnut that I used on the inside. I have had some barn doors in my barn for years, and I had no idea what the wood was, and it turned out to be wormy chestnut. And normally I just use the outside of the wood. I shave it on my table saw. I'll cut it this width first, and then I'll go back through with it faced against the guard, and that way I get the thickness of the wood I want. And what's left
Philip,
would be something like this. And so that's my framing material and my rafters.
Philip, let me ask you this. What thickness do you not prefer to use for wood?
Well, I prefer oak works real good. That's what this is. Last night, depending on the amount of time, I was going to show, and I can do this next time, on how I built this barn. First, you just start out with your 2 exterior walls and put your wood on, and there's a reason for doing that, because once you put your cross pieces on, and you frame out for your doors and everything, but these will cut out once the barn is built. But once you do that, I'll show how that you how do you figure your rafters and your bird mouse. That way the bird mouth will sit over this. If you do the rafters first, then you got to cut these around where the raptor tails hang down, and it's just a lot of time. So just knowing that cuts a lot of time off of building this little barn, which is very simple at that point.
Philip, let me ask you this: what thickness of wood do you use?
What thickness?
Okay, I've got this down to about an eighth of an inch.
Okay.
But the wood is so it varies so much because of the age and the wear on it. It's going to be thinner on some pieces. On your guide, it'll come out. I won't ever be able to find one right now, but you'll have some to where it will almost be paper thin. And so if I'm going vertical, now if I'm going with a lap siding, which I do a lot of barns where I do the lap siding, now I've got to cut it pretty thin. Pretty well, I need a poplar, a tulip poplar, yellow poplar for that. And that wood is, of course, a lot more silverish gray. I do like the poplar very much. I don't have any there, but it's very forgiving when you saw it thin.
Where do you get all this wood from?
Well, this come off of my barn, but you'd be surprised at how much I see and find at here we have dumpsters we take our trash to, and there are bins there where contractors and people that are tearing down something, old fences or whatever, and they'll just throw the wood in there, and they don't mind you getting it out. And you could find some good wood with a good patina. Of course, you could do the same thing using popsicle sticks if you wanted to. Cut the square end off and just glue them on, paint it white or paint it red, barn red or whatever. I like working with the rustic. I like things to be distressed, I guess, most of what I do, except for custom work. And if I do custom work, I do exactly what it is. And I don't know whether Phil was able to get the Union Station up on the screen tonight that I sent. That's a good example of working with this cement. It is. Okay.
That's a huge structure.
It is. That's a huge building. I think top of if I remember, I may be wrong, the top of those towers are like 300 something feet. At G scale, that thing is about, if I remember, about 40 inches tall. That is a huge building. Also did the AT&T tower, which is quite large for him. He has that's Jim Miller in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. He has one of the largest G-scale trains in the country. He has, 100 engines, 500 cars. It's just, and while I was working on the Union Station, the tornado hit Nashville, Mount Juliet, hit his yard. It missed his storage building where the train cars was, but it totally took every tree out and in his entire layout. Luckily, he didn't have nothing but track out at the time, but I was working on the Union Station when that happened. So.
Well, that must have been scary for him. Well, listen, I know that you've got to get out of here because you do it at your church, but I look forward to hearing from you again next week, Phil. Thank you so much for your time. Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
And we'll see you next week. You take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right.
Well, now I've got a special guest tonight, John Sigurdote, who is the show manager for the Amherst show coming up. And I talked to him briefly on the telephone, and he and I share, I think, some common feelings about the hobby and trying to help each other. And they have a scholarship program. So I said, well, John, why don't you come on the show and talk about it a little bit? And John, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Thanks, Jim. I'm real happy to be here, and this is a lot of fun. I had no idea there'd be this many people involved, so it's cool.
Well, listen, tell us a little bit about the Amherst show and about your scholarship program that you all offer.
Oh gosh, yeah, I'll tell you about the scholarship program in a little bit more. But first, about the show. Many of you know about it. It's actually not this weekend, but the weekend after. So it's the 28th and 29th of January. Weather's looking pretty good as we look at advanced forecasts. But size-wise, with 350,000 square feet indoors, it's probably the largest show in the country. I would challenge anybody to ask or state what show is bigger and how much. And I've been to a lot of the other shows, but I don't mean to make it sound so competitive, because the way we look at it, and Jim, what we talked about earlier was we're all in this together just to promote the hobby. So I'm not really worried about what size the show is, but it is about 8 acres of indoor space, and we have a live steam locomotive that comes down from Adaville on 100 feet of track, and they blast the whistle and ring the bell and let the kids climb on board when it's stationary. And so we have some outdoor exhibits as well. But what happens from the proceeds of the show, and on a great year, we'll get 25,000 people at the show. We had a massive snowstorm last year. And even on the day of the blizzard, we had 5,000 people in the show. And we kind of made up for it the following day, where we had about another 5,000 or 6,000. So that was about half our normal population, but things are looking good this year. But I mentioned that because the more people that come to the show, the better off we are as far as what we do with the money. A lot of people say, well, the Amherst Railway Society, you guys must have a ton of money. And we do during showtime. But after all the expenses of the show and to run our building and such, we give it all away. So we've given away since the 1991 is when our first year of starting doing that. We've given away over $830,000 so far. And a big portion of that is scholarships. And we'll give scholarships to the young men and women who are off to college, much like what you guys have been talking about. We'll even give scholarships to rail camp. There's much like space camp, when you go and you're a kid, you want to be an astronaut. They do the same thing for engineers and folks that are interested in railroading. And there's an East Coast camp, there's a West Coast camp, and pre-COVID, we gave a scholarship to a deserving young man in that case, who spent a week to 10 days at a camp on the grounds of one of the large railroads out there, and they sit with engineers, they sit with brakemen, they sit with dispatchers, and they actually learn all about railroads. So it's a lot of fun for them. And we had the gentleman come back and give a little talk at one of our monthly meetings about what happened, and he had a lot of pictures to go with it. And it's not a huge amount of money to go to this rail camp, but we've given scholarships for folks to go to college too. I basically, that's how the Amherst Railway Society started so many years ago. This is our 55th show. Even the year that COVID broke out, we had a virtual show, much like what you guys are doing here. So we've never missed a year with some sort of a show. And this all started back in the early 60s with a bunch of college professors. If you guys know Amherst, Massachusetts, there's UMass, there's Amherst, there's this New Hampshire College and Smith, and there's so many up there. I could picture all of these faculty members sitting around going, hey, I didn't know you played with trains. And yeah, so do I. And that's what happened. They started to get together and just show off their stuff. And one thing led to another, started to spread to the crowds, and they were taking donations. And the next thing you know, they ran out of room, and then they moved down to the Eastern States Exhibition Fairgrounds, and the rest is history. And so when we started to make all that money, we said, let's do something about it. And because we're a nonprofit organization, we said, hey, let's give it away to kids that deserve it, as well as any 501c3 nonprofit organizations that have something to do with railroads. So we basically, people say, what happens? We give it all away. That's what happens.
Well, John, I tell you, your program sounds fantastic. so impressed with the amount of effort that you guys have put into it and the amount of money that you've been able to contribute to the young people's education. I think it's phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate it, Jim. And what I'm excited about, to let everybody else here know, is you guys actually are going to have some tables at the show this year. So we need to spread the word, and we're all in on helping you and seeing what we could do to publicize this more and drum up some more business in the form of donations or money or whatever it'll take. But we need to spread the word.
Well, we're concentrating on getting applicants right now. We want to make sure that we really can reach the kids. If the kids find out about us and so forth, that's why I was so thankful that you guys got us a couple of tables and so forth. One of the people that's going to be there is Chris Course, and Chris is on the show tonight. Chris, do you have any questions for John about the show or anything?
No, I think if you've never been there, from what I can tell, this is the year to go. So, I mean, just basically right around me, I've got a ton of people that, I really look up to in the business and go, oh my gosh, wow, this is going to be huge. So, last year was, last year with the blizzard, we had like, one big name after another dropping off because of the storm. And I went up anyway, and things weren't all that pleasant, but you got to cut your teeth somewhere. And
Chris, it was our worst show ever. I don't mind saying. I mean, it was such a blizzard. There were 25 to 30 inches of snow in Boston the following day, and people couldn't even dig out to get to the show.
Yeah, and things are looking. If you're up there early, I'm doing not one but 2 clinics now. So
and our pre-clinics, yeah, I heard about that actually. Thank you very much. And we have some good indicators this year that things are really what I call quote unquote back to normal. If you don't have a hotel yet, you're in trouble, because every single one of our hotels, of which there are a couple dozen, are full. And I mean full. I call and say, hey, do you have anything? And they go, John, nothing left. And our pre-sales of tickets are up 400 or 500 people from whenever we started doing it. So things look great. And I start looking at farmers' almanacs and anything I can get my hands on to talk about weather to make sure, but things are looking good so far this year. But in New England, I'll let you know the day before.
And another one of our members is also going to be with you, Dylan Lambert. And Dylan, I don't know whether you're on the show tonight or not. If you are, do you have any questions for John? I guess he's not here this evening. But anyway, we've got several people coming to the show that are going to represent us. And I thank you again, John, for everything that you're doing for us. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me on, just to spread the good word about getting younger people involved in this fantastic arena of railroading.
John, I agree with you. It's critical. It really is critical. And we owe it to them, because people helped us along the way when we were younger, and now it's our turn.
That's right. I look forward to it.
Thanks so much here. Talk to you later. Well, next I've got another person that I want to introduce to you, Walt Lyles, the Piedmont division of the SER. Walt is the secretary of the SER. He's a director of the Piedmont division. He's been a superintendent. He belongs to several other organizations around the Atlanta area. So far, I haven't met anybody in the Piedmont division that lives in Atlanta. They always say, well, we live in a city that I've never heard of. And then I say, well, I've never heard of that. Where is it? And it's 4 miles from Atlanta, 5 miles from Atlanta or something, but I haven't met anybody downtown Atlanta yet. But anyway, Walt, thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing about your scholarship program that you guys are doing.
I appreciate you having me on. If it makes you feel better, I actually married an Atlanta native. She's actually from the city of Atlanta. So, yeah, my name's Walt, and I appreciate y'all letting me have you on tonight. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about what the Piedmont, where we're at. We, back just before COVID, over that period of that year of 2020, one of the things we were able to do, Jim, is we had a member that's an MMR, Dr. Joe Nichols Sr., and a lot of people know him around the United States, been around for a long time, excellent modeler. And he decided he had some wonderful prints and paintings in his collection, and he wanted to get rid of a few things. And so what we did at our monthly meetings that we had, we actually auctioned off those prints or paintings that were very nicely framed. I mean, they were very nice. And so each one of those that was sold at the meeting, we took that money and set it aside to offer free memberships for youth. Now, where it goes a little different for us is that we don't just give it out to be giving it out. What we do want to do, because there's a lot of strict regulations nowadays working with young people and stuff like that, we want a commitment from the young person. The first thing we do, we watch for a young person. And we were talking a little bit before the show here. Hank was talking about it, and we have our annual train show and we do a raffle layout. Well, the raffle layout attracts a lot of people to it. And what you'll see is that you will see a young person that they're just really into it. Well, you pay attention to those little things. They come up and they start talking and they start asking questions. And that's the first thing you watch for, because that young person is so intrigued with trains. And the parents are kind of, sometimes they're maybe chasing a sibling around or something like that, but we're paying attention to that young person's interest. So a lot of times we'll pull the parents aside and we will talk to them and ask them if they would be interested in us sponsoring their young person as a membership. Now, what we ask of them is, if we do that, we just ask that they support that child to make sure they bring them to our events, to our meetings. We just want to try to get a commitment from the family as well as the young person. And so that's the first stage of recognizing who has potential, has that interest, that hopefully will take it to the next level and grow with them, throughout their, hopefully throughout the hobby for a long time. And that's one of the hardest things to read, but you can usually pick up on a little bit more than just excitement just because they see trains. They're looking, they're asking you questions about locomotives and cars, and you're like, okay, they really have they call it the train disease, so that's what it's about. And it does get you excited because you want to know, I'm just hearing what they were talking about here a few minutes ago. We do want the young people in the hobby, and it is a fun hobby, and there's so much to offer. Even those that even have all this electronic and gadgetry, with the different devices nowadays, there's huge opportunities for them in this hobby with all the stuff they know. So they bring a lot to the table as well. So we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to express themselves and learn things. And then we want to make sure they're mentored as well. That's the biggest step in this whole thing, is mentoring. So, somewhere along the line, hopefully each one of us had somebody that served an example in the mentorship in this hobby and left an example that we want to make sure that we carried on. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. So
I couldn't agree. I think you're exactly right. I couldn't agree more with your sentiment.
When I was about 13, my family was going through a divorce, and so things were kind of crazy around the house when I was young. But I had a man that I met him at the hobby shop in Savannah, Georgia, is where I'm from. Stelgis Nichols was the hobby shop owner, and he was my first link to trains, just to understand and model trains. But then there was somebody in the store one day, and he introduced me to Nate Stone. And Nate Stone just really took an interest in me. And he took me around to different train stuff. And I got to go to his layout. I learned stuff. And then I actually started doing stuff with him. I was building framework. He was teaching me how to use the power tools. He taught me how to do the scenery. And I was 14 years old doing this stuff. And I was learning from somebody that knew how to do it. And we are still friends today. I'm 57 and I was 14, when I started doing stuff with him, and we're still friends today. Even though I live up here, we're still friends. So We've had been great. I mean, he actually toasted my wife and I at our wedding 33 years ago. So, that's the kind of friendship we have. So, but that's what mentorship is about.
Well, you're very fortunate. I wish everybody could have that kind of luck and success with a mentor, because it's so important, in my opinion. And maybe some of the kids that you all are helping with the scholarships that you're giving, maybe at some time, maybe they can apply for ours. So I
hope so. And one of the things a lot of people don't know is that the National Model Railroad Association has a student membership. So there's 2 qualifications. You have to be under either 18, or you can be between 19 and 25 and be a student if you have a valid ID. And
Right.
That's the membership we give them, which is a full membership. And it is fantastic opportunity for a young person. But I would encourage divisions, find a way to introduce them, get them into it, because now they can get access to the NMRA magazine. They get information about the division and all the activities. And that's one of the biggest to me, is starting to see these photographs of these models from great modelers. And it starts to get in their head, okay, these are not toy trains anymore. These are good models. And I know, Jim, that's one of the things you worry about, is people still modeling anymore, or are they just putting stuff down, turning on the switch, and are they actually using their skill sets and learning how to use, learn how to paint, decal, and model, and measure and cut and things like that. So, so important to this hobby.
I agree. Well, Walt, thank you so much for joining us this evening and telling us about the Piedmont and about your program. And I hope you come back and join us again.
I will. Look forward to it. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you so much. Well, now let's go to Hank Primas for our quick tip of the evening. And I might mention, Hank needs some quick tips. So if any of you have any ideas or tips that you use on your modeling all the time, tell Hank about it, because he can't come up with them all by himself. And if you enjoy these, then we need to hear from you as well as Hank. But tonight it's Hank. Hank, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you, Jim. Yeah, one thing as Jim was just saying, this is the last tip that I actually have. I'm looking around for some more, and every once in a while I find one. But if anybody has a good one, just let me know. I'll be glad to give you credit for it, and other people will then know it and be able to use it. So here we go, trying. Now, this is always the difficult part for me. So, well, here we go, share screen. Is it working?
No.
As usual.
Share screen, share the upper left.
Yeah.
Screen, click on it and then click the word share. You're sharing.
Okay. Well, let me get going here. Let's see if it's this one. Nope, it's not this one. Okay. And as usual, I'm lost.
Far upper right. Just close that window. Far upper right. Click that, the X. Now try presentation. When did you save it?
Oh, a while back.
Far upper right. Click.
Yeah. There we go. Let me try this.
Presentation 12.
Nope.
blocks.
Okay. What this presentation is about blocks. Mostly I use wood. And I saw on Philip's table, he had blocks of wood up in the front. These are different sizes. In fact, this one block of wood I used to show me the colors of different things that I use. But these are to be used when what you're working on is not flat. Okay. Now, if I were going to work on the back of this, I have this in the front. So therefore, I need something to hold it up. There we go. As I flip it over and work on it. That is one of the reasons I just have a couple of blocks of wood around. Of course, I have my block of my 2x4, which is like a comfort blanket. But scraps of wood, instead of just pitching them, keep them for a little bit, put them to the side, because you never know. Okay, I've just lost power here. Okay.
You're still on.
Okay, I gotta go. There I am.
You're still on.
I'm still on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, you're gonna have to
Hank,
take
I'm
me
gonna
off
have
so I can get some power here.
Yeah, Hank, I'm gonna have to try to come back to you in a few minutes and see if you've got it straightened out. Okay?
Yep, because I'll be working
Okay.
over here.
All right. Well, now let's go to Gary Shurgold, MMR, for our bits and pieces of this evening. And again, Gary needs help with bits and pieces. So if you've got some ideas about some easy ways to use various pieces of material for model railroading, let Gary know about it. Gary, welcome.
Thanks very much, Jim. Okay, tonight on Bits and Pieces, here's green. Everyone can see that, I hope.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, on Bits and Pieces tonight, we're going to talk about what's on my workbench. Now, if you take a look at that picture, there's quite a few things here. And what I'm going to talk about tonight are just a few little tips that while you're working on models, little things to have sitting around, and actually things that are quite helpful when you're building a model. One of them will be, you can see here, one of the things I do, I work with a large sheet of porcelain that you can see here, this large sheet. And I find it much better than glass. It's just like glass. And you can see I've put a square attached with two-sided tape on it to put my models on. So there it is there. And I put a piece of track in behind, because once I build a model, I want to make sure it's engaged. The couplers and everything are engaged. So you can see here, the track I've got in the back, my square, and then my working surface. And the reason I like this product is if you get paint or mess on it, it cleans up quite well. You can wash it off. If this becomes dry, I take that little block of sandpaper right here and I just sand it, and it doesn't scratch the material or anything. It's quite durable. Now, one of the other things I do, everyone uses crazy glue, and this is LePage's crazy glue. When these are empty, I don't, I actually take them apart. And the reason I take them apart is this is what I want. These little holders right here, I use for holding my paintbrush when I'm working, so that if I'm painting something and I've got to put the brush down, this holds them. And it keeps the paintbrush from landing on the surface, messing things up. And then after I clean my brushes, I put them in there to dry before I put them back with the rest of the brushes that I have. Now, on my workbench, I have a little glue holder. Now, that comes in really handy because everyone knows if you got to put this thing on its proper angle, which is the bottom down, then you got to turn it back over and get the glue to flow properly. But you build a little item like this that I took a little bit of time to build. You can put your glue applicator in there. And what I did was I put a magnet on the back of it, glued it to the bottom. This is made out of plastic. And then it snaps on to my square that I have here and holds it in place so that if I do knock it, it doesn't go anywhere. Now, if you don't want to build one of these, you've seen me before talk about these medicine containers. Just take one of the medicine containers and put your little glue container in it, and it keeps the glue on the bottom. So it'd be easy to use. Now, one of the other things I do on the end of my square, I have this bottle cap. And I put all kinds of glue in here, like crazy glue and everything else. And when that gets full, all I do is snap it off and put a brand new one on. So that's another nice little handy tip. If you're doing it, you just pour your glue in there. You take your little dabbers or whatever, get some glue and touch your area. Okay, Hank talked about these last week, and everyone knows what these are. They're little cleaning brushes or small application brushes. And what I do is I save these after I use them, and I snip off the ends once they're used, and I end up with something like this. Now, if you take a pair of tweezers or pliers and you use the flat end, not the gauged end, you can use a gauged end or a cut end, use the flat end. And what I do with mine is I use either leave them as a tip or I flatten them, and you get a very fine little spoon. So you can put a little dab of glue on there and apply that to wherever you wish to apply the glue on your material in a sensitive spot. And as you can see here, here are some tips. There's, like flat, a little longer one, little spoon style, small tip and small tip. These are great for dipping in the glue, and you end up with a very small dab of glue where you want to place it. Now, paintbrushes. Everyone's got lots of paintbrushes, and over a period of time, they get tattered and you just can't use them anymore. So one of the things I do too with the paintbrushes is I take some pins, straight pins, cut them off, and I use these, make these little applicator hairs with them. Now I use these for applying decals, getting into like fine little areas in soft wood or whatever, where I want to put something in and apply something when I'm building things. And I also take them and I take the ends and flatten them down, like you can see here. And sometimes I just remove the bristles. This one here is the bristles removed and completely flattened. And I use these as stir sticks in my when I'm mixing paint and different things that I want to mix up. And that's bits and pieces for tonight, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. And one of the things that I like about it is it doesn't cost a lot of money.
No. You're utilizing
so thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Well, now we're going to change around the show a little bit. Normally we do the MyBuild at the very end of our show. But tonight we're going to move it up and do it kind of in the middle of it. So Chris, I will turn it over to you, sir, right after we run the promotion video, Phil, for Dan Daugherty's company.
Welcome to the world of scale, O&S railroading. We are your resource for all O&S scale modeling. Both our magazines are advertiser supported and free to read online, download as a PDF, or even print. All advertisers are hot linked to their website, so if you see something you like, just click. Please check out our websites for the current issues. All back issues available free for the O-Scale Resource and the S-Scale Resource magazines. And, if you are a manufacturer, distributor, or retail establishment, please contact us through our website for advertising opportunities.
I really appreciate Amy and Dan for the support and how gracious they've been about allowing New Tracks to talk about our show and so forth in their magazines. So thank you so much for doing that. We really do appreciate your support. And now I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Now off share screen. Maybe. There we go. All right. Of course, this is January 18th. MyBuild, and of course, it's featuring you as always. We've got some neat stuff tonight. We don't have a lot of participants, but we do have some quality. We've got a bunch of different projects that are all going on. First up is Martin. You up, Martin?
Oh, I guess I can get up.
All right. Looks like you've got 3 slides. You ready?
Yeah, why don't you start the first one?
All right. There we go.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, so this is an old kit car that I picked up off eBay because I'd never heard of the company before. A Hartley model, as you can see, it says on the end of the box. And it's something of a representation of a Pennsylvania Railroad XL work car. It's not quite right for any particular one, but that doesn't matter. I thought it was kind of interesting. And for only a mildly extortionate amount of money through eBay, I managed to acquire this. You can see it has some problems when I got it. Some of the window buttons are broken out. The underbody is just strange, in that it's recessed into the floor like that. I don't quite understand that, but okay. That's easily fixed. And the one end had an Ajax brake gearbox on the end, and it's on upside down, which makes it even more interesting. Way too late and upside down, so that had to come off. And taking that off, I found out that the sides on this, it's not scribed wood, that's actually embossed paper. So I tore that up a little bit, but I had to do some repair work on it, and I replaced the entire underbody, actually ripped everything off, filled it in, built it back up, and put a whole new underbody in it. So let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, before I forget, that roof is actually removable too. So yeah, that actually had bits and odds and ends and debris in it, and that actually comes off. So adding all the details in, well, all the grab irons, corner braces, brake work, smoke stack, and a coat of paint and some touch-up paint. And now it's actually a pretty decent looking little car. And I'm rather pleased with it. The roof still was removable. And with a little bit of luck, at about, I'm guessing maybe 2 to 3 days, I'll have the interior retrofitted into it. That's got it's going to have a lot of interesting 3D printed stuff in it that I found from a company on Etsy. So there's one more slide. Oh, I didn't give you a slide of the underbody. Oh, well, I must have been lax. So one thing I did add to this, I saw a picture where it had drop step ends. So I added all the door work and all the framing and all the ladders and the brake shaft and everything. And this funky platform that's on the brake platform, it's actually reversed on one side. So I took a little bit of brass and some soldering to make modify a brass part and flip over the one bracket, snip it off, flip it over, solder it back on the other side. But all the little bits and bobs, all the grab irons and such, and then the drop steps, which are actually hinged and work. They go up and down. And I don't know if I don't know if I sent you a slide with them going up and down, but they do go up and down. So I thought that was a fun little thing to do. So that was make some hinges, make a platform, some soldering work, and getting it all to clear everything else so they would actually operate was the main challenge there. The roof really doesn't quite fit as tight as you might want it to, but okay. So when I'm that age, my roof probably won't fit very well either, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. This kit clearly predates me by a couple of decades, I think. But it's a very nice car, and also I think it may well be 17/64. It may be a little bit. It seems just a little too big for 1/48. And if I don't have another slide, then I'm done.
Yep, I guess that's it. Any questions for Martin?
No.
All right, I guess not. Yeah, it's
There we
funny.
go.
I figured with it being all gray like that, it was plastic, but that's it's pretty interesting that it's other materials.
It's actually rather it's all the rest of it's actually almost all 1/4-inch thick wood.
Yeah.
Those walls are actually car walls are way too thick, but the thing is, and all the window parts, that's all paper.
Wow.
So replacing that was, the broken out pieces was a little bit tricky. I don't usually work with paper and broken pieces and everything. So that was laminating up some very, very small HO strip wood, like HO 1x4 and stuff, and laminating it up from behind just to build up something to give it something to glue into, and so it be held together and be fairly firm. But it's also a car, I learned to my chagrin that you have to pick it up very, very carefully, not with your fingers on the windows, because you'll break the daggone thing out that you just fixed.
Alrighty.
There you go.
Any more any questions for Martin before we move on?
Yeah, Martin, you said you're getting interior parts for it.
Yeah.
Let's see, what company?
That same one that we talked about before, Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got a stove, they've got an ice box, kitchen stuff, pots and pans and such. Because the inside of the label on the roof says something like dining car. And I thought, okay, that's easy enough to do. So, some stuff out of my own parts bins and stuff, plus that stuff from Pacific Northwest. That'll finish that out nicely. I have to build a few tables and I have to add some chairs and stuff, but
put a little dab of bacon grease in there so it smells right too.
Right. Yeah. Maybe I can find an O-scale ham to hang from the ceiling, just for the ambiance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Be interesting. All right. Anything else for Martin? All right. Well, thanks, Martin.
Yep.
Look forward to seeing what you come up with next month. Oh, there is one more. There it is. Oh,
there it is. I thought I gave you that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I replaced the entire underbody, as you can see, built up a whole new center sill, some cast bolsters, and a whole new K-brake system. If you're going to rip it all out, you might as well put something all back in nicely.
Yeah. Yep. Looks very nice.
Yep.
All righty. We'll
There
move
you go.
on. Nope. Thanks, Martin. All right. This next up is Greg Cassidy. Actually, this is kind of a project that that I started and Greg picked up on and went hog wild with it. And all I gotta say is I hope everybody has had their tetanus shot because they're going to need it. Ready, Martin or Greg?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I'll start out. There's a little bit of context with this. This is a project I've been working on with Conowingo Models since probably last spring or summer, maybe. And I just happened to come across this little, I thought it was a truckable push boat. I guess that's essentially what's been turned into. But I decided to do some research to see what I could figure out about it. This boat actually belonged to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it belonged to the Baltimore district. And it was actually built in 1968. Near as I can tell, it's been sitting on this lowboy for several years. I talked to the people that whose property this is on, and they really couldn't provide me with any information. They were trying to convince me it was a tugboat from World War II, which it very clearly is not. Because I did contact the Corps of Engineers and said, "Hey, what can you tell me about this?" Well, we found a little something here. You saw that BD5 that was on the back. And well, I looked up BD5, and with the help of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, I found that this little boat here actually had a front end loader on it at one point. And it was used, Florida. Wish I could learn to spell. This was actually used in the recovery effort for the Air Florida Flight 90 flight, which crashed into the Potomac River in January of 1982. For those that remember, I think one of the big things that was on there was while they were being de-iced, one of the times one of the pilot or the co-pilot made some Nancy Reagan jokes, and apparently that was part of the whole news spiel on it. Unfortunately, but anyway, so this boat did serve with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers until probably sometime in the 80s or possibly the 90s, when it was replaced by a new BD5, an updated version. Anyway, so here it is sitting on a, well, there it was sitting on a lowboy. I'll turn it over to Greg at this point.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, what Chris sent me was he had laser cut the sides of the hull and some of the superstructure above deck and sent it to me, said, see what you can do with it. So using some plastic sheeting, I put on the rest of the hull, and I finished the superstructure up on the top, but I was going to model it as it's sitting now on that lowboy. So one of the things was to get it nice and rusty. And as we had seen a couple weeks ago with the diorama of the boat on the log pond, a nice way of doing that is just getting your paint on the boat and then using some pigments and sprinkling them on it, which is basically what I did here. And I've done these steps before, but never to a whole piece like this. Go ahead to the next one. And then this is where it was in the middle of me working on it. And I had printed out some pictures to go by, and I had also gotten some boating detail parts from Bruce Nickerson at Seaport Models, and added some of those on. Go to the next one. Trying to build what I could see in Chris's photos for what had used to hold the front end loader part. I just used plastruct pieces and glued them together. It looked like it had some little steps on them or something. You can go to the next one.
Actually, what this is, what you're actually looking at here, I found after, I believe what had happened was, and the Corps of Engineers hasn't been able to tell me the full story, but I believe what happened was when they auctioned it off, somewhere in that process, the front end loader was removed, and they put bumpers on there so that they could push around barges. So what you're actually looking at here, these are pictures of the bumpers that were part of whoever owned it after the Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, they looked like bumpers. I just assumed they were kind of hidden under the loader, but yeah, I can see how they retrofit them. Okay, next. And then got some other details that were matching the pictures that Chris had sent. It actually looked like the pipes on top had been added at a much later date because they looked like they were some kind of PVC or something. Go to the next one. That's the same one I think we saw.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, now I could tell in Chris's picture that it looked like it had a single propeller and a rudder underneath, and while you could barely see it if it was sitting on a low buoy, I went ahead and added that. And for the flagpole, I just took a piece of styrene rod and heated up the end so it had a ball on it. Next. And this is what I ended up with once I completely got it rusted. For the roof and the front of the superstructure, I just again used plastic sheeting. And then, as I said, the rusting was mostly a mixture of pigments with some Vallejo rusting liquids added in. And I do have a low buoy on order that I'll try to make look like the one that it's sitting on, and then I'll have pretty much that whole seam completed. So that's pretty much it for the boat right now.
Yeah, I actually do think I have one more shot here, but I'm just, when Greg sent me these shots, I was absolutely blown away by what he's done with it. Because when I first saw this thing, I was like, well, no, I kind of have to make it look, when I do the kit, I have to make it look like it did when it was real, because I have no idea how I'd duplicate what it looks like now. But holy crap, Greg hit this one completely out of the park. Not even a chance of of failure on this. I mean, he just did an awesome job. All right, now this we got a 3D printer for Christmas. So Dylan Lambert built up the front end loader, and this is the current status of the front end loader portion. As you can see, it still needs a little bit of work. Need to thicken up the walls some more. I think this is actually the one that I printed up a few days ago. But you can also see the version that I did up in the original colors for the boat. So also,
yeah, did you get a decal for that Corps of Army Engineers?
Yeah, I made one, or I had one. I had one made, or a series of them made, so I could include them in the kit. But the kit I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to sell it as a couple different pieces or as one big kit with 3 different items in it, because there will be a full hull version, a waterline version, and then of course a depressed center flat car. So I figured, heck, this is model railroad, so you got to put it on a flat car. But anyway, so that's where we stand now with this, and hopefully we can in the next month or so we can get this front end loader perfected, and we can start producing the kits. Are there any questions for either Greg or myself on this?
Yeah, are you gonna have it available in S scale?
Oh, jeez.
That looks like it'd be a perfect river with some minor modifications. Be a perfect river tug in S scale, and I know a couple guys looking for them.
Yeah, I'll see what we can do. I had kind of maybe in the back of my head, I thought maybe once this thing is done, we can start modifying it and do something else with it. But yeah, I haven't. I've had a few requests for some S scale stuff, but yeah, that's a little bit down the road for us. Anyone else? All righty. Thanks, Greg. A fantastic job. I never would have thought that anybody would have been able to make it look like you did.
Well, thanks for getting me started on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I forgot. There's more.
Oh, yeah. I had sent you pictures of, this is a couple of American Model Builder laser kits that I'd finished for a client. It's just the section house on the left and the farmhouse on the right. There's nothing special about them. I had built these kits before, and the A and B laser kits go together pretty well. The house on the right, he said he wanted it painted in a pastel color. So I went to Michael's and bought every pastel craft paint they had, because I found I didn't have any. And this ended up being something like avocado or papaya or something. And when the house on the right, and when I first painted it, it was just a little too pastel. So I said, okay, if I weather it some, and he said, yeah, fine. So it's a weathered pastel farmhouse.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've done one of these, and I remember something about there was a lot of those lick 'em stick 'em detail parts in there.
They have a lot of
like.
adhesive decals, a lot of the pieces that make up the porch and the lattice work and stuff. But it all went together pretty good.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. All right. And let's see, is there more? Yep. Oh, that's right. I forgot the next one.
Oh, okay. Lighthouse. This last year I built a Conowingo lighthouse, and I included a light and a foghorn in this, but it was just sitting on my shelf. And I said, someday I got to put a base on that. So I got a piece of insulation foam, cut it to fit inside a wooden frame that I made, and then just covered it with some hydrocal rock castings and a whole bunch of Martin Wellberg landscaping materials. And so now I have a base for the lighthouse to sit on, and it's a lot happier now.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. It looks like it's a perfect setting for that lighthouse. All right, any questions for Greg? Now I know that is the last slide because I put an L in the bottom left corner.
Great job, Greg, on all of them.
Yeah, fantastic job.
This was my Christmas vacation.
Okay.
Well, I have
All right.
not
Go ahead.
It's not necessarily with these specific models. Right now I'm putting together the bobber boxcar.
Yeah.
And I wound up putting some glue on it, and next thing I know, the whole thing just warped out of no longer straight. How does one make it straight again?
What you could do is wet it down. If you have let's say you've got some hunter line stains, you could put a coat on there, and then it depends. Let's see, I think you want to put it, actually, why don't you put it on both sides, and then very quickly put a heavy weight on top of it, and that will flatten it.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. All right, any more questions for Greg? All right, thanks, Greg. Fantastic work as usual. All right, now we've got Phil.
Oh, jeez.
You up there, Phil?
I sure am. Hang on.
All right, looks like you've got 10 slides, if I did this right.
Yeah, I've got too many slides, but that's okay. So go and jump through, and we'll jump through it. So this is actually kind of, I think I talked about this a long time ago, early on, and we started New Tracks. This is a module I've been building, kind of a back-end project. It's a 12-foot by 4-foot, 3-foot module of kind of a reimagining of Moss Landing. The railroad was the Pajaro Valley Consolidated Railroad that ran through there. What you see at the top picture is kind of a view of the total module. It goes from the left is a fuel pier based on the Standard Oil pier, which was in Monterey, a cannery. And I'll talk a bit about the acrylic structure. That's actually modeled after the Hovden cannery, which became the Monterey Bay Aquarium, kind of in terms of look and feel. And then on the right is two buildings. Those two buildings, the right one, the white building, is a sugar warehouse for Spreckels. This area was actually driven by Spreckels, who built a huge beet refinery in Salinas. And the idea is that about a third to a quarter of the production flows through this warehouse by shipment instead of going on the SP. I'll actually talk about that model in a future session. It actually has 3D printed framed walls, and you kind of see an interior picture of it on the right there at the bottom. What I really want to talk about today is the red building. This is considered a transfer building. It was a place where other things moved in and out from the sea to the railroad. So go ahead and jump to the next picture.
Sure.
We go very fast. So this is just a bit about construction, because the construction techniques here were driven pretty much by how I thought of this as a module. Have really not had a huge amount of success in modules going in trailers, bouncing around in details. So I decided as I built this that the buildings would be removable. They all sit in a wood base. You can see that on the upper left. Those bases were built around a specific block of wood that fits down into them. You can kind of see that on the bottom left in the picture that includes all the foam. And then a piece of masonite was added on top of that to actually be the building base. And that's kind of what you see on the right, which is the landscaped with all the tracks, etc. And the two buildings you saw, the white building is the closer one. The red building is the back one. And the red building, you notice, has a track that goes inside of it. That was a feature I kind of just wanted in that building. So we're going to jump to the next slide. As part of designing this, the concept was to have these bases have a building on them. And I thought a lot about how to build something that would be handled and taken on and off, and how did you do it so it wouldn't fall apart. And I came up with this concept of using an acrylic box. So I actually built all three buildings out of acrylic boxes. This is 1/8" acrylic from Tabs Plastic, cut on a combination of a table saw and with a scroll saw to actually get the shape of the buildings. The building that's closest there, the one that became the transfer building, you can kind of see in the lower left. I've added on the outside, this is just siding that's been added on the outside. It's there's a baffle siding on the outside. On the inside is scribed wood. On the right two pictures you can kind of see the exterior. The exterior was painted and kind of dry brushed. The interior was stained. One of the really cool things about acrylic is as long as you use latex paints and you use alcohol-based washes, you don't have to worry about any issues. Just clean it up with a little bit of alcohol and a Q-tip. I found that because I put the rail in the bottom, I had to come up with a way to match the floor depth. Turns out the plexiglass, the 1/8" was just about exactly the same thickness as ON30 ties from Micro Engineering. So I ended up putting some plexiglass down. It's all been epoxied. All the wood and plexiglass here is all done with just 5-minute epoxy. And then you'll notice I put a couple of rails down with ACC because I realized that at some point I had to figure out a way to get items from the dock back onto a rail car. So go ahead and jump to the next photo. So this is basically what it looks like now. It still needs a lot of weathering and detail parts, but I thought it was kind of at the point it was interesting to look at it. So this is the building sitting on the pier. Again, it just pops out. The crates in the front there are actually glued to the pier, so they stay in place. I actually put together the tracks that are inside the building now tie into tracks out on the pier. They go through a little foul crossover there so that you can move things in and out. And to move things in and out, I built a little carrier there that's a couple of HO wheel sets, some wood, some brass, and then a little framework. Go ahead and jump to the next picture. So this is a couple of pictures of the interior. So kind of understand this is on a module that's 2 feet wide. So that front door is about 8 inches from the edge, 7 to 8 inches from the edge of the module. and the back wall is about a foot and a half from the back of the module, a little over a foot. But on that side of the module, there's really nothing there. So you can see those back windows really easily. So the interior and having a really cool interior for the public to see, I think is very important. So one of the things I did was built this gantry system, which is designed to actually carry the anything from a flat car out to a ship, or from a ship to the flat car, by using the roller in the center. And then there's a little office you can see on the left and the top. So a little bit of office, a receiving desk, a whole bunch of forms, which, if you look at them closely, are actually printed lading forms based on some railroad forms that I found. You notice the wood gantry frame all has little gussets with NBWs on it. They're all slightly rusted. And the carrier mechanism is actually an HON 18 ore car. That's the base of it, and I drilled a hole, and then it's got a chain lift underneath it. So go ahead and jump to the. But let me just, before we jump, the walls here, you notice I had that inside was the stained wood. What I did was I added the interior framing on the inside of the walls. So there's basically cross battens, and then the framing. And the framing was based on the framing up at the California State Railroad Museum. They actually have the old SP, what was Central Pacific shops that were built in the 1860s. And they use this framing that's very much a tunnel framing if you look at the building. So I tried to kind of replicate that in here and use this concept of something that looks a little bit like tunnel framing. So go ahead and jump to the next photo. So one of the keys is how this looks to the public from the outside. So these are kind of some views that you would see through it with the doors open. If you were looking at the module from the back side, you kind of look through it and you can see the office. The right picture is through from where the train tracks come into the building. And then the bottom middle picture is actually kind of looking from the front, and you can see kind of the receiving deck and back inside. Jump to the next one. So this is kind of a picture of the way the whole building looks. And I like this picture because it actually is the one picture that really belies this concept that there's some still thickness there in the walls. One of the things that's interesting is if you looked at all the pictures you saw so far, it's interesting to ask yourself if you ever noticed that the walls were really thick, because they're actually visible in a couple of the pictures, but it really wasn't obvious. But you can see here the outer wall cladding, the inner cladding, kind of the framing, and then all the details. The desk, the receiving desk, the motor, and the winch are all from Kevin at Narrow Gauge Modeling Company. The winch and the motor are Crow River products. They're really quite nice. The workbench is actually something that I got in a box of parts I bought and I built the base for. The desk is 3D printed, and the chair was, again, in a box of parts. All the crates are 3D printed using a filament printer, and they're then painted with rattle can, the matte castle rock from paint, and then stained using acrylic washes. So go ahead and jump to the next photo. So I thought I'd close with just a couple of interesting comments on this build and from a build technique. The first is on the windows. When you look through the windows, you're looking through 1/8" plexiglass. And what's really amazing is, even for someone who's a reasonably skilled modeler, it's almost hard to notice. What you see on the upper left is a picture that looks through, and you can see the boxcar inside, and you can see the lettering. That's actually dry transfer lettering I designed for a kind of personal branded railroad. But the images are quite clear when you look through there. There's a little bit of wood in the bottom of the window frames, but that actually would almost be normal when you look through a window. You see the picture at the right, you get great detail when you look through closely. The bottom left is actually taken with the lights out and just the interior lights on, and you can still see through and see the detail. They're out of focus though, so it's not as clear. The thing that I thought was really interesting is I blew up a picture of the window. So when you look from the inside, if you look closely, you can actually see that there's a gap there on the vertical side between the exterior and the interior, which based on the viewing angle is offset by the thickness of the glass. And you can also notice a little bit of the wood from the outside wood that was added on the bottom. But if you jump to the next slide, what's really interesting is when you look at this picture, it's almost impossible to notice that it's 1/8-inch thick glass, plexiglass on the outside. The detail parts essentially really push that out of view. And then the last image here just is kind of a little interesting technique. Jump to the next one. The roof is actually removable. It's also made out of plexiglass. When I built it, I actually started to think, because I wanted to put lighting in it, and I knew the lighting was going to be in the roof and the roof was going to be removable. So what I did was when I built the roof, I put these gussets on the roof and I mounted them almost tight with the edge of the plexiglass box on the bottom. I found some brass shoes. I don't know where I found them. They were epoxied in and they're tied to a brass rod that runs down to the base. Then up on those gussets on the top, basically there's a piece of thick copper wire wrapped around those, and that then connects to the 2 strings of lights, which are actually run as a string of lights, 12 volts with 1 resistor for the 3 lights. So essentially the power goes through, so you just drop the roof on, lights come on, lift it up, the lights go out. So that's it, Chris.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it's kind of, and by the way, I will close on one thing just as kind of a precursor. So I built this building, and when I got the roof done, I was sitting there figuring out how I was going to put something in. So if you looked up into the roof, it would look good. And I thought, well, I need to build some trusses, and I had bought a 3D printer. So I decided to 3D print those trusses to put in there. And as I was sitting looking at those 3D printed trusses and the building next to it, which is the warehouse, that's what actually was the genesis for going in and making the warehouse into a fully 3D printed framed building. So it's kind of a bit of an evolution of thought process about how to build things. But overall, I think for the kind of the structure it is and the way it's built very strongly, I think it comes out to being very close to what you would call a quote unquote contest level model. So pretty proud of it. So that's, yes, sir.
What did you use to glue to the plexiglass?
Basically all the wood in that was just glued with epoxy. I bought one of those 5-minute tubes, the squeeze with the 2 tubes in it. And I just kind of got in the habit, I could squeeze out enough epoxy, mix it up, spread it on the wood and stick it on. Just be very careful not to get any where the glazing was, where the window glazing was.
Greg, did you use your own CAD designs to do the 3D printed trusses and all the other details that you put in there?
Yeah, I use FreeCAD, and I've gotten pretty good at it. It's a drawing CAD program, not like Tinkercad, which is object. I'm pretty good with it. So yeah, these are just drawn up as a set of, it really way I ended up doing them. And I actually, at some point I'll do a clinic and talk about it, but you basically do the outside of the frame, then you do the inside, you do a cutout to get the inside, and then you just lay in all the other pieces and they just all basically fill in. But it's pretty quick. It's once you get the kind of the process down, it's reasonably quick.
Okay.
And like the light trays are also, those are actually a 3D printed channel. So they're actually a U on the backside is where the wiring goes in, and then it's glued in there after I got it wired up.
That looks good. So FreeCAD is a little easier to use if you've got a strong, like an AutoCAD background.
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's a freeware version of AutoCAD. So if you're kind of familiar with the concept of you draw in 2 dimensions, you extrude into 3 dimensions, you pocket out, that kind of way of, there's this kind of thing with the CAD programs of understanding how to take something and turn it into a CAD object. If the methodologies you use in those are the same as you would use in FreeCAD.
Makes sense. Gonna give that a try. So some of the others, SketchUp and places I've tried are not compatible if you've done a lot of 2D CAD work. It gets confusing.
Yep, exactly. Cool. So that's it, Chris. I'll throw it back to you.
Okay. Any more questions for Phil? Just this model is just blew me away. Just the whole thing of being able to drop the roof on and have the lights come on. That's fantastic all on its own. Alrighty, well, thanks, Phil. And maybe we'll move on. Come on, computer. Oh, there we go. All right, Jeff Jordan. You up, Jeff?
I'm here.
All right, you ready?
All set.
All right, looks like you got 3 slides on here.
Yes.
And this was another really interesting project. I mean, this month I think we haven't had the number of people that we normally have, but I think for what we got for this month, we have some really interesting subjects that more than make up for the numbers. So
yeah, what we've
anyway.
got here, these are a couple of photographs. I was flipping through old issues of Narrow Gauge and Shortline Gazette and found this article and realized that you've probably seen the Bachmann ON30 trench locomotive, and we all wondered, why did they do that? There's there can't be that many people modeling military installations and World War I military railroads. And then I discovered that about 300 of those locomotives were manufactured, but only 100 of them made it to France. And the other 200 were mostly sold off as surplus after the war, and all kinds of industrial and branch line and lumber roads picked them up and used them. And that's what happened here. This is a trench locomotive that was bought secondhand by the Winchester Lumber Company. Winchester, running from the Winchester and Wardensville, ran from Winchester, Virginia to Wardensville, West Virginia, where there was a huge planing mill. And then from Wardensville into the woods in West Virginia, they ran a narrow gauge railroad to bring in rough cut lumber. And so that's what's going on in the upper left-hand picture. Is there large rough cut beams are being hauled in by the trench locomotive there. The little center picture there with the tools and so forth, we owe that to the federal government. They were worried about forest fires and wanted to make sure that this little railroad was taking sufficient precautions to prevent forest fires. And so they sent some people out to investigate, and they took these terrific close-up photographs of the locomotive. And so that got me thinking. Train World is selling this locomotive at a bargain price. I've got this narrow gauge railroad almost in my backyard. I had to see if I couldn't turn the trench locomotive into a Winchester Lumber Company locomotive. So next slide, please. And there she is. There's a close-up of the photograph that I worked from, and there's the finished locomotive. That's the trench locomotive. Came in olive green, so I stripped it, I repainted it using the technique I previously described. It's craft acrylic paint thinned with airbrush acrylic thinner. Came out very nice, very smooth, very happy with that finish, which is not quite dead black. And then went a little crazy and ordered a set of custom decals rather than try and individually letter it. So I got a set of the Winchester Lumber Company decals printed up. She's been weathered with weathering powders. And again, I found a neat technique. If you just hit it directly with this sooty black, it doesn't show up very well. So first I gave it a pretty extensive coat of the darkest gray weathering compound, weathering chalk, and then that left it kind of gray looking, and then went over it with another coat of the black soot weathering chalk, and it gave you this finished kind of stained and gritty appearance, which I'm really happy with how it came out. And then the front of the locomotive kind of shows off my handiwork, because the rest of it, other than the painting and lettering, is pretty much stock. But as you see in the photographs there is this box. The front step there is not on the original locomotive. So somewhere in its life, they added that metal step or metal box on the front. And so I created that out of evergreen styrene sheets, several layers to get the step back. and I actually handmade those rivet strips using the finest, thinnest evergreen styrene sheet I could find, and punched the rivets with a dental tool and a scale rule, and made a good length and picked out the best part. I think it came out pretty nice. There's also that little panel on the left. Again, I don't know why it's there, but it's riveted in, and so it's got rivets on it. And then you needed the toolbox. The toolbox evidently was carrying the firefighting tools, the shovels, picks, etc. And I sorted through my scrap wood pile and found this really nice scrap wood, which had a really decent grain to begin with. I enhanced the grain a little bit more by scraping it and then stained it with hunter line stains, which really brought out the grooves and gave it a really good weather beaten effect on the front. And so I'm really happy how closely it matches the photograph. Next slide, please. All right. There should be just a couple of more views. There's the side-on view. You can see the Bachmann locos. They put a lot of detail in there. Look at all the little taps and faucets on there, the builder plate, the interior of the cab with all the valves and gauges. Can't see it because it's shadowed, but I did take the cab off and highlight the controls and the gauges inside the cab. So when you look at it in person, painted up, there's a siphon hose hanging off the back there, and painted it in a contrasting color to make it stand out a little bit. And then the bottom photo is my reproduction of the lead photo of the locomotive pulling a flat car load of rough sawn timber.
Yeah, this is it's amazing the details that you wouldn't think Bachmann would include those kind of details, but they really they did a great job.
I did a lot of reading about this model, and this model is actually kind of an odd. They took they apparently produce an 060 in HO scale, and that's what the mechanism is their HO scale 060, and they added the idler wheel axles in the front and the back, but then they really went to town on the body of the locomotive. Look at the nice rivet detail on the cab. Look at the pops, the safety valves, the whistle with a line back to the cab, the valve off of the steam dome, the tap off of the back of the water tanks. That's all stock model. The builder plate. So there's a lot of detail there. The only thing it's missing, and I gave up on, is it should have valve gear, but I really couldn't figure out how to get valve gear onto it. And in the photographs, you can see most of the valve gear is deeply in the shadows anyhow. But so this little European locomotive actually found a second life working in a lumber railroad in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you can even, for you did a local tie-in. That's to me, that was an extra layer of coolness.
That was part of what motivated me to do it, was that it was a little railroad. You know, I know today it's the Winchester and Western, and then it was the Winchester and Wardensville. I've rail found that railroad. I've been to Wardensville. And so when I saw that the Winchester Lumber Company had one of these little locomotives, it really was fun to have, in effect, one of my home railroads. And I'm going to figure out how I can get a lumber branch onto my pike so that they can bring down loads of timber from the mill down to the main line.
Cool. Alrighty, are there any questions for Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff, I've seen them selling this locomotive, and I've only seen it with sound. Were you able to? Was yours like that, or you said you got it kind of at a really good price? Did they have it without sound?
Well, that was the deal. It's Train World, and they have them right now, $200.
Okay.
And consider that that's got a TSC wow sound.
Wow.
DTC decoder with sound and a speaker in it with really nice sound. the price of the locomotive, it's almost like you bought the decoder and the sound and they gave you the locomotive at $200. Now, they originally made this locomotive in like 3 Army paint schemes and then 1 undeck. You can't find the undeck anywhere. But to my surprise, and I've tried hard on a lot of Bachmann pieces to remove their lettering before and couldn't get it off. This one, the lettering came right off. A little easy lift off, and I had the Army markings off, and then just added my decals and the number 5 out of my decal box. The funny thing about this is that they had 3 locomotives and they numbered it 1, 2, and 5. Nobody knows why, but that's number 5. Oh, and incidentally, if anybody wants to replicate this, I have a whole sheet of Winchester Lumber Company decals now. So if you'd like to buy a pair or more of Winchester Lumber Co. decals at a bargain price, just send me a message.
I might get in touch, maybe re-letter my Pensy caboose with that. Who knows?
Yeah, what you see is what you get. They're the railroad Roman sized specifically to fit that tank.
Yeah, I guess technically, well, I guess that's not too terribly far from you either then, Greg.
No, it's right in my backyard. And, I set up that Bachmann ON30 under the tree every year. And I'm running Pensy around. I'm not a big Pensy fan. I'd rather have something.
The sound on this locomotive is terrific. It's got great sound. It has a little hooter type whistle. Notice they didn't build them with bells, so there's no bell on the model, though I think the sound chip actually does come with a bell. The other thing it has, which I'd never experienced before, it has audio programming. So when you put it on your programming track and go to program it, it talks to you. And a little voice says programming, and then it tells you which CV you're in and walks you through reprogramming the chip literally with audio spoken instructions.
Wow. That'd be worth it just for that.
I'd never experienced that before. I was blown away by that. The other thing that's on there, which is a vestige of it being the trench locomotive, is command number 28 is battle sounds.
Cool.
That wow sound can really throw you for a loop. It's amazing when your locomotive's talking back to you. Makes you realize it's smarter than you are.
Yeah. Hey, it probably says to me, "Hey, dummy, you pushed the wrong button again."
Hey guys, this is great, but you realize we've got an hour of show to go yet. So I'm sorry, but
no, absolutely.
All righty.
Thank you.
So Chris, that's it for MyBuild for tonight. But I do appreciate everybody who wanted to participate, and anybody that's left. We'll include you on next month, and we'll try to make sure that nobody is left out next month. It's my fault. I apologize, but we've really got to move on.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, Chris, if you could send the photos that you send me tonight or tomorrow, if you could do them in smaller bunches so that I can deal with them, because I can't deal with the large files.
Yeah, I think one thing that may help is if I resize them, because I think last time I sent you like 7 emails with all those files in it, and that's a little,
and two of them I couldn't even open. They were so big. So I just need smaller groupings of the photos somehow.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I'll probably just resize them, and that'll cut down on the size.
Thanks so much. And guys, I'm so sorry about tonight. This has been a full show. I knew it was going to be a full show, and we're doing the best we can to accommodate everybody. But I'll try to move it along here because we've got some great features here that I don't want you to miss that I really think are important. The next one up is by Bob Davidson, Workshops, Tips, Tricks, Tools, and Techniques. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. So we're into this week's episode. Hope everybody can see that.
Yes, sir.
Great. Again, real quick, I'm just come from a theatrical and exhibit background. This week, I promise this will be the last kind of nerdy thing that I do, and then we'll get into some real tools and hands-on stuff. But I'm in the process of developing my new, excuse me, layout. So I thought I would just real quickly go through some of the big picture items that I use to determine how I'm going to model and what I'm going to model. So, and it's subtitled French 101. The first thing I just want to talk about is mise en scène. Mise en scène, obviously a French term. It comes from the film and theater industries. And what it does is it asks you as a modeler to think about everything that's going to be in the viewer's picture. So it's not just the model, it's the surround, it's in terms of theater or film, it's the people, it's also the motion. Literally, it means placing on stage. But so when you are doing a layout, starting up as I am, one of the things I was thinking about was how am I going to, where is everything going to go? What are the relationships between the objects? How am I going to light them? How am I going to detail them, etc. So real quick, on the left in theater and film, we look at composition, visual composition. You'll have sets, props, actors, costumes, lighting, and motion. And what we do in the model making and model railroading is we're going to have a theme or a period or a feel. We're going to add in scenery, a scenic background to place our layout. We're going to have buildings, people and vehicles, miscellaneous details, lighting, and then motion, because all that's going to go together to create the visual picture composition of your layout. One of the things I think we always should be thinking about, and Phil's was such a great example of this, is what is the viewer going to experience? We want to think about that, even if it's ourselves as the viewer, not necessarily a guest, someone coming to see our layout. So something to just keep in mind is mise en scène. In a practical sense, here's the next French term, mise en place. I actually learned this from my son. My son is a chef, classically trained chef, and mise en place is a French term which is used by cooks and chefs, which really is just talking about doing your homework, having all your ingredients ready to go, having your work area prepared, mixing bowls, tools, equipment, etc. So again, making the comparison in the culinary world, you read the recipe, prepare the workspace, gather ingredients, etc. You can read that, portion everything. And the last one, clean as you go. In model making, you want to read and understand the instructions. I tend to take the instructions and take them away from my workspace. I'll go upstairs and I'll read them at the table or in a chair or something, just to go through and really have an understanding of what it is that I'm going to be building. In the case of something that I'm scratch building, I want to actually take some notes and write down how I want to proceed, how I perceive this as moving ahead. Preparing your workspace. This is the old thing about doing plumbing at home. How many times are you going to go to Home Depot? Well, if you prepare your workspace and gather all the materials and tools, you want to try to have everything in place before you start. And then preparing your materials, de-spruing stuff, texturing, pre-painting stuff, building in modules so that you think ahead as to how this is all going to go together. Follow the instructions. Most of the manufacturers we deal with, they know what they're talking about. So there's times when we're going to maybe do things in a little different order, but in general, we're going to follow the instructions. And again, we're going to clean as we go. One of the things I try to do, because we're all working typically on several things at once. So I try to compartmentalize every project into its own space, and so that I'm not intermingling stuff and losing things. So, because it's a good way, having everything organized is a good way to prevent fits and starts in your model making. So that's kind of my kind of workshop. Not really. It's kind of a prep idea for tonight. The tool of the week is a drill guide. Real simple. I have what's called essential tremor. I shake. So drilling holes sometimes is a challenge. These little drill blocks are great for ensuring that you're drilling holes perpendicular to your work surface. What's cool on them also is you see the little grooves on the sides of the block down along here. These all line up with the centers of the holes. So you can actually use this if you set a center line through the holes and then line up. If you put hash marks down, you can then practically, line up where your holes are going to be drilled. This is the one I keep out in my main shop where I'm doing framing and stuff like that. They do make another one. This is Big Gators, which goes down to 3/64 in terms of drill size. So this is probably more useful for some of the stuff we're going to be doing. But again, it's a great way to make sure that the holes you're drilling are perpendicular, square. So highly recommended. The back sides of both of those are notched out, so you can use them. You can clamp them to a tube and then use it to accurately locate a hole and drill through into a tube. So nice little tool. The little one is $8 on Amazon, and the big one is more expensive, but still a good investment, like I say, especially if you're like me and you shake a lot. So neat website this week, real quick, stumac.com. Stumac is a company that sells tools and equipment for luthiers, which are people who make guitars. I actually found this through a friend of mine. I'm building one of my grandsons a miniature guitar. But they have some really neat tools and stuff and some of their glues and tapes and things like that. They just have some neat stuff for some good ideas. If you're ever, this is something here, these drop fill toothpicks. I know we were talking before about using the old paint little micro brushes, but these are kind of cool. You see the ends here, and these are called drop fill. You see how they're notched, so they'll actually pick up glue, and you can I haven't bought these, but they're pretty cool. A lot of the stuff on this website, frankly, is pretty pricey, but it's a good resource to look for things and then see if you can find them cheaper somewhere else. Who's going to pay $18 for a roll of painter's tape? But so that's kind of what I have for the website this week. So next week, let me go back to this. I'm going to start introducing next week's show. So next week, we're going to look at work surface tips and tricks and using magnets to do layouts. So that's this week's show for me.
Well, Bob, I appreciate it so very much. You always have some great information and great tips and so forth. And it's enlightening to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now let's bring in Jess Dozier. Now, Jess is about halfway through building his diorama. He's been gone the last couple of weeks, and by now he would have normally been finished with it. But because of the weather out in California and everything sliding away or getting soaked pretty well, he hasn't been able to join us the last 2 weeks. So Jess, welcome back. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm good to be back. I'm not getting rained down anymore, so that's not a bad thing. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're kind of almost to the home stretch, finishing up components. So we're getting to that point where how do we take this square block, right? That's just a 12 by 12, board, basically, or, actually a board with some slats to actually, let me bring this one over. This is the actual finished diorama, right? So it looks like it all comes together, but there's a lot more to it, right? Dioramas, you want them, just like your lab, you want them to tell a story, right? So it takes some fiddling around sometimes if you got an idea of what you want to do, to end up where you want to be, right? So in this case, I wanted this thing, as a kid, I wanted it to look good from all sides. So I tried to plan it out, and I, got this little outhouse and dock, got the trestle, a couple little scenery elements, and then of course got the logboat, that really is kind of the star of the show. But and the idea of this too is when I did it, I was like, man, this is a foot long. This is perfect for a locomotive. Great, or something to display a car on, or in my case, a Shay, Climax, whatever. So what I'm going to do over the next week is, even though putting the diagram is quick, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it sort of is a process you can do in a few hours. You can put a lot of stuff, but you've got to plan it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, as I finish this one, I'm going to take a series of photos. And then that way, that'll be easier to share the process, and it'll be much quicker, because really, once it's planned, it really is almost like start, finish. It actually works out really well for the most part, except for the water. The water is really that last step to do this wet on wet. Okay, so a couple little things that I've got to get done before our for the next week. And I finally got, I think next 2 shows, I should be able to finish it up and get it in pretty good shape. So what I've got left, I basically have to assemble the motor. Now I know this is going to be hard to see, but this is all the basically white metal parts. This is part of what I worked with Keith to get. It's an old McKenzie Buddha motor. It's a great kit. Now it's really simple. It's just white metal. What I do, and it was an accident how I did it before, and I just like the effect of it, is that it is white metal. You put it in a blacken it and pull it out, get it immediately in water to basically get it to stop reacting. Because if you leave it in water, like I missed one of my boat cleats, I left it in overnight and it dissolved it, because the stuff is an acid, it'll just eat it. But what I do is that I drop my stuff in the blacken it. I use from Rio Grande company. So it's much more powerful than blacken it. Blacken it's fully diluted, but this stuff it's strong, and it blackens things really quickly. And then what I do is I pull it out and I immediately get it in the water, but I leave it in the water, and I leave it in the water overnight. Now, the reason I do this is I did it by accident one night. I didn't take some stuff out. And what I found the next day is that, yeah, it had stopped the reaction, but it had left some really, that's a better look at it. It left some really cool effects on it. Looking. Can you hear that? See that okay? So it almost like rusts it. It leaves stains, it leaves deposits. So then going back and just adding a little bit of paint, to highlight some stuff, it really makes, if you want something to look really old, it makes it happen really naturally. So it's really, that part's really cool. Now, so I'll get that motor assembled, poof, it'll be ready next week. Then basically it's just taking the components. We got basically the motor housing for the logboat. Again, nothing, this is just a resin casting. I've added that texture, kind of the wet on wet with the chalk to get some grime. I got a little fuel tank, just dabbed it with just a really light red, and then hit it with some basically alcohol, and then touch the top with a aged brass. But the only reason I even painted that fuel tank was just to give it some color contrast, because we don't, sometimes it's really easy to get just too many color or not enough color in something. And if you have a little bit of color in something, it'll draw your eye to it. And so if you want, you want someone to draw your eye into your diorama, a little bit of color tricks your brain into looking into it pretty quickly. So again, just got the components, the trestle components, the stringers, scenery block. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. My super clean workbench. Now, the next step really, when I did the first one, it took me a while. So this one's obviously, I kind of know how I want it to be. but it took me some figuring, you know, how do I want to lay this out? I try to avoid things, if you make it too perpendicular, then they have a tendency not to look right. So the big thing here is that I made sure that this, when I did the scenery piece, I put a little bit of an angle in it. And then I've got these stringers, and they're going to get covered by basically the deck. So they're sort of designed to fit across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these trestle pieces, and I'm going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where I want everything to go. I'm just going to take it with a pencil or a little Sharpie, and basically to mark where I want the land to go, because most of this thing is going to be water. I only want dirt, obviously, where there's no water. So when I apply that dirt, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to stipple on a heavy coat of yellow or white glue. And what I use for dirt, because it's a kit, I'm not actually allowed to send dirt in the mail. Go figure. For some reason that potentially can be looked at as something risky. So what I do is I just go to Home Depot and I buy a sanded tile mix. Various colors are available. I found the one that looked the most like dirt that and I mix that, and I add 50% of mortar sand into it. And what's cool about it is that it's legal to ship, it's cheap, and it looks shockingly like dirt. When it's finished, it takes stain really well, because, you know, it also has, when you wet it, it basically has the wet water, you know, built in. So it's almost like it's self-ballast, it's self-glues. You don't have to, even though I generally go back and I do add, you know, wet water and a diluted glue mixture, but it basically holds itself together really well, and it has a really nice texture. So once I mark where the dirt's going to go, straightforward, then I'm going to go ahead and, before I put that dirt down, think of, when you're putting scenery together, think of it as layers, and you got to go in the right order, because you don't want to put something on top of something or screw something up you've already done. So the first thing I want to do is, even though I have a base, wherever my water is going to be, I want to put down a nice base coat of what I want that water to look like. Now, this water is really thin on the diorama itself. It's just a very thin coating of Woodland Scenics acrylic, you know, they're liquid real water, and it's really like, man, it's probably a 32nd of an inch thick. It's really thin. I let that dry. That just gives a little bit of a shine. And then I go back and I add acrylic heavy gel, which is something you can get from art stores. Michael's has it. I buy it from Dick Blick Art Supply because I use a lot of it. That's what actually will give this the texture, the waves. So, but if you notice here, I think you can see the dirt. So what I want to do here, and it's hard to tell just, you know, being on video, but what I do is I go through, darker colors represent depth, lighter colors represent shallow. It's really subtle, but where I want there to be depth, even though I'm going to hide most of it, I still go through and I do the exercise. I literally use good old Woodland Scenics, super cheap. What's cool about this stuff is it's thinned already, and it's very natural looking earth tones. And so you can get real subtle shades from this really easily mixing it. It's cheap. I've had this stuff forever. It goes a long ways. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off where my scenery is going to go. Poof. I'm going to mark off where my dirt is going to be. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to paint where my water, you know, whatever, this water's clear. I don't want to add color to my water, even though you can add acrylic colors to the Woodland Scenics. But then you're going to have, that's going to be the dominant color. It's not going to show any depth. It's not going to show any variation. And it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't quite look right. I want to have some translucence. So I want to paint whatever I want to see through it. I want it on that base. All right. If I explain that well or not, but so then really, so over the next few days, what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll get the base done. And basically what happens is once that base water and the colors are there and the dirt, you know, then the next thing we'll do is I'll put that dirt where I want it to go. Okay. then literally it's sort of a very quick wet on wet process. I'll put that heavy gel down and literally plant everything. Okay. So I'll go through and do a little photo series, and what I'll do is we'll review that next week, and then that'll lead us into the last show, which is really about kind of the fun stuff for me. I mean, I think it's all fun, but you can tell I'm a little nuts about it, but adding a little detail, the rags, whatever it is, the barrels. There's a bird on here. He fell to his death. I got to find him. But that little stuff just finishes it. So we're getting close. To me, this is like all the components almost ready. Really, it's just putting it all together. But there's a process to that. And if you kind of follow that process, usually, your results come out really, really, like, in my brain, it doesn't take a lot of art or like, artistry. If you just follow a process, then poof, your results are going to be great. All right. I know that was brief, but I know your show is pretty tight on time, Jim, but any questions at all?
I think it's going to be a super end of the show when you put all of this together. I can't wait to see what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it comes together shockingly fast, which is cool. I only have a couple more steps, but literally when you're like, the boat's going to be 100% done, it gets planted in the water, the logs get planted in the water, glue the deck on, drop the little dock into that wet water. The water's wet, sprinkle on some bark, place the scenery. I mean, it's sort of, what's cool about it is that it goes from a bunch of stuff to something really quick, which personally I like because, I'm impatient. So yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of pulling it all together.
Yes, thanks so very much. I really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks. You guys have a great night. And the show was awesome. I picked up a lot of stuff tonight. I was just kind of like some pretty cool stuff for sure.
That's great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And now let's talk to Tom Ferrel. Tom is building a new layout, and he's really got some fantastic backdrop scenery to show you tonight. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Yeah, so Jim has kindly invited me to do a step-by-step of my new rustic buff and old Gothic railroad. And we're going to show how I put the half of the backdrops up tonight. So if we could switch to the slides here. That's a picture of my old rustic buff and old Gothic ON30 railroad. Just always like to show an old photograph. My idea here is to build an even better railroad. And this is my 7th railroad, and I've been doing this for over 50 years. And I'm really trying to take my time. So that's what I mean by no compromises. Everything has an order. On my old layout, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago in a previous presentation, I jumped around a lot from bench work to backdrops to wiring to this to that. This I'm going step by step by step, and I'm holding to my promise. So I'll be brief this evening because we're running late. We go to the next slide. My first rustic buff and old Gothic had a company called Backdrop Warehouse backdrops. They were basically photographic paper. And they were, the thing I liked about it is they had very nice photographs to choose from. But what I didn't like about them is they were very fragile. They were basically paper. So if you got any paint or Sculptamold or plaster on them, they damaged and they got stained. And if you wanted to touch something up with paint, it was pretty obvious. Anyway, so this time around, and once you put a backdrop up, build your layout out around it, there's no way of easily replacing it, at least on my layouts. So this time I did some research, and all these names sound similar, but I found a company called Railroad Backdrops. And these are a polypropylene material as opposed to a photographic paper. You can optionally get a peel and stick material on them, which is what I did. So I didn't have to put my own adhesive up there like on the last backdrop, warehouse backdrops. So one half of my layout, the layout that I'll feature tonight, required 3 24-inch high, 144-inch long pieces. The key thing tonight is the takeaways. If you go to the expense of these backdrops, there's hopefully a learning curve I can help you with here, because even though I was very careful, I learned quite a few things on putting these up. So we go to the next slide. So from my January 4th presentation, I was very meticulous, at least I thought I was, on preparing the masonite to accept these backdrops. So you can reference this presentation, but basically I try to get it as smooth as possible. And I thought these polypropylene backdrops would be a little more forgiving than the paper backdrops. But that was one takeaway. I will do an even better job on the second half of this layout. So if you look at that photograph in the upper left, I did the right-hand side of my layout with the 344-inch pieces. The left-hand side will require 4 144-inch long pieces. It's 45 feet in length, and what I'm going to show you tonight is 35 feet. One of the takeaways is you really have to be sensitive to any little bumps or any little seams if you don't want to see them on your backdrop. So let's go to the next slide. So just for giggles, I taped up the first mock-up to see what things would look like. And I took one of my scratch-built models named after a couple of my favorite 2 modelers. And I just wanted to see if the perspective was there. It seems to work. You know, I just lost the PowerPoint. Phil, are we, is the PowerPoint still there or what? Hello, Jim. Is
Phil still here?
I can do a share screen. I have it up.
He should be. I don't know where he went.
He said that he was going to.
There it is. There it is. There
Okay.
it is.
Sorry. Okay. So here we are. So I just took one of my dioramas, if you will. All my buildings are built on either foam. Actually, the only one built on foam is this one. The others are all built on plywood. And I just put it up there to see what things would look like straight on. I think it looks pretty acceptable. Okay, so next slide. These things were so long, 144 inches, I built a temporary workstation in the garage. I took a 4x8 sheet of foam, put it on my table saw with a something to hold up one end of the other end of that foam, put a piece of plywood on there, and you know, to trim these things up, they're they're printed and they have a 1/4 inch white perimeter around them. I wanted that top 1/4 inch removed. You can see on the very right photo, I've got a metal yardstick there and a fresh X-Acto blade in my knife, and then some painter's tape to hold everything in place. So I trimmed the top right off, which was a simple thing to do on my temporary workbench. Okay. Next slide. I took a piece of scrap material, and you have an option to just take this plastic film off the back of the backdrop and simply use the adhesive that's on there and just stick it right on your masonite. Or you can spray the back of the backdrop with water and mist it, and that gives you more working time. I found that with my masonite, since I triple painted it with a oil-based primer, I found at the end of it, when I was all done, I didn't really need the water, and I won't use the water next time. And even though we'll get to it, when you put the backdrop up and you try and squeegee that water out, you don't get it all. And the next morning you find little bubbles that I'm still working on trying to get out. So next time I'm just going to do it dry. But I did find if you stick this material to a unprimed, unsealed masonite, you only get it sticks so much that you only get one shot. And if you try to pull it off, you won't have any adhesive. You'll have masonite on your hands. So we'll go to the takeaways at the very end, but let's go to the next slide. So there's the first 144-inch long, 24-inch high piece that I put up. I think it looks pretty neat. And then we'll go to the next slide. There's looking at the other direction. I should point out, if you look about a third of the way down the on this photograph, and you see that like white snow-capped mountain, and then there's glaciers. So you see the glaciers and then look at 12 o'clock. I didn't really like that snow cap on there. I painted it out, which I'll have to show at some later date, but I was successful in painting out some of the things I didn't like on this on these backdrops. But I mean, they look perfectly acceptable. I just thought it was too white. Anyway, go to the next slide. That's backdrop number 2. I would defy anybody to see the seams on these that I put in. I really effectively nailed the seams. You can't see them. And a little trick is when you do, you have to cut them parallel and perpendicular because they do have white, they do require trimming on both ends. So not only did I trim the 1/4 inch off the top, I had to trim the ends because they were white as well. But so long as you're perfectly square, when you match these backdrops up, they mate very well. The trick is you go back with some acrylic paint in the case, and you hit that seam, you rub paint on the seam because you'll see the edge, a little edge. But when you do that with acrylic paint matching, say, these pine trees, I mean, it just disappears right before your eyes. Same with the blue. I chose a overcast skies, but with just a little blue and gray paint on that seam, and they just, I mean, it's like magic. They just go away. Just a little tip there. Okay, and the next slide. And this is the third and final piece. I reshaped that mountain that you see that one that's about 2/3 of the way back. It looks like I shaped that a little differently with paint. Fortunately, I'm somewhat of an artist, so you can't really tell, but it's a little more attractive shape in my point of view. And again, there's a seam in there, and you can't see it. You really can't. Okay, next slide. Now, the key takeaways, this polypropylene material is definitely superior to the photographic paper. It doesn't crease very, it's when you're working this, it's like working with a bag of snakes. You don't know whether to let go or hold on. This is not an easy thing to do. I just did it single-handedly with no assistance. But if you work with the paper, it creases and you see the folds. This is much more, you'd really have to do something to damage this polypropylene. The self-adhesive is better than applying your own. The paper one before, you can hang it with Velcro. You can hang it with spray adhesive. You can hang it with wallpaper paste. This, you don't have to do any of that. It's just, you peel off a piece of thin plastic and you've got your self-adhesive. You got to be careful. Everything's parallel and perpendicular, but it rolls right on. And even though I say I was maniacal on the surface preparation, I'll do a better job on the other side. These things are extremely expensive. I guess I should mention the costs just so you know what you're dealing with. This side alone was $870. The other side is going to push $1,000. So the real key takeaway is you don't necessarily need water. You'll get bubbles. No matter how careful you are squeezing that water out of there. And if you're not going to use water, you better triple coat it with a oil-based primer. You can't, if you use a latex, it'll lift. But if you use a durable primer, oil-based, you can get away with, even while you're rolling this out and placing it on, if you don't press it immediately onto the backdrop, you can peel it off a little bit and adjust it. They do tend to, you got to be careful they don't walk. They don't, as you're rolling it out, it can go up or down. I'll take some questions on this if anybody has any, but yeah.
Yeah, Tom, you said that you do even more in your preparation next time. What did you find lacking that you had done? Because it looks like you had done more than probably anybody else would have anyway.
Well, if I look behind me at this thing, which you can't, well, I have a photograph of my old railroad, but I can see a couple bumps from the I didn't get it perfectly smooth in areas, and I got one seam that I'm going to a seam on the masonite that's showing through the even though I was careful, I guess I missed it. I'm going to put a mountain there so you won't see it, but it just has to be absolutely perfect, or you're going to see this show through the polypropylene. My assumption was the polypropylene would be more forgiving than the photographic paper. I was wrong.
What's the thickness of the
I was
media?
going to say thickness of it.
It's thin. It's like a like a 010, something like that, 010 material. It's really thin material, but it conforms to every little bump and things. I mean, I did a pretty fair job of preparing it if you saw my January 4th presentation, but I'm going to go back and rework the other side because we're talking about $2,000 here.
Well, you were talking about with the water where you get some little bubbles. Can you prick those and work them out like with a car wrap or something?
Yeah, I have pricked them with an X-Acto knife. I just slice and push them out. But there's where water built up, it looks like it's soaked through the back of this. I don't know how the hell you could get soaked through on polypropylene, but it seemed to have weakened the material, which is weird. I mean, that's truly weird. It's a plastic material. So I'm just going to do it dry next time. And it's going to be, if I have to spend another week or two massaging that other side, it's going to be even better,
And any thoughts of having a helper?
Well, I thought if I had my wife here, we'd get divorced. I've called this backdrop so many different names, it's holy now. It's
thanks.
Yeah.
So Tom, I've seen your work in process. It's amazing. I just did 24 feet of this on a modular layout that I'm building, and it's no joke. But it's amazing when it's done. Like I can echo his comments. It's beautiful, but it's like it's a little stressful, right? You're putting up 24 feet, $750 worth of stuff, and you're like, I got one shot at this. It's a little sketchy. It's it's stressful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my son helped me, but we did it dry, so it was a one-shot deal, and almost I just was kind of like, I felt like we got lucky because we had a few little things, but it came out pretty good. But man, the 3M paper, like to your point, it looks freaking amazing. I mean, it's the best looking backdrops I've ever seen. right?
Yeah, they're-
Quality wise, I mean, they're just beautiful. And once you get a layout in front of them, you know what I mean? Like, you know, all that stuff will, you know, kind of probably vanish anyway, but they really, you know, did you get them from aerobackdrops.com as well, or someone else?
I got it from, it's on the beginning of the presentation. I can never remember the name of them because they're so similar.
There's railroad backdrops.
Railroad backdrops, yeah.
Yeah, that's who I got mine from, but really good quality. I mean,
Yeah,
just-
they're excellent quality, and there were a couple things I didn't like on the glacier. You know, a snow cap mount I painted out, and I painted it with acrylic. Then I hit it with Tester's flat dull coat, and you can't see that I painted it. And
yeah, congratulations, it's beautiful though. I mean, it's just amazing work.
thank you. And and that's the real stress. You know, you're working with such, it's a one-shot deal. You got to be really careful. And I guess it's the least favorite part of the hobby for me, is putting these things up, you know, but it makes the biggest impact, you know. That's why I went to the expense, because, you know, if you saw my old Rustic Buff and Old Gothic, it had nice backdrops, but they were paper, and over time, you know, if you bump into it, they tear and they stain, and so you know, I wanted to switch, and I'm happy I did. But again, the takeaways are, if you can do it dry, because the water creates problems itself. If you want the ability to readjust, triple paint it with an oil-based primer, you can peel it off. If you don't peel it off, if you just put it on masonite, you're going to get little fuzzies. You're going to pull the masonite right off the wall, and you don't get an adjustment. And yeah, be careful it doesn't walk up or down. You know, that's the key, you know. Oh, and the seams. If you get a seam, go back with matching paint with your finger and just go over that seam. Disappears like magic, you know, neat little trick. Yeah. And you use, yeah, that's about it, I guess, really. Yeah. Next time, if everybody wants to hear, next time will be my Digitrax DCC installation. The wiring looks very similar to a nuclear submarine. I swear to God, there's a lot of wires, but it's basically done. So,
just the first time you've ever tried this backdrop?
This type of backdrop, yeah. I used like I said, shorter, maybe 5 foot pieces, or 4 foot pieces from Backdrop Warehouse, which are paper.
Yeah.
And I hung one of them with Velcro. You get little waves and things, and you know, it wasn't satisfactory. You know, so
yeah.
The second half of this will even this. I mean, it looks spectacular. It's behind me, not my quarry here, but it looks really nice. You know, it's just it's a learning curve. I thought it would go smoother than it did, but it was a bit stressful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly if you got a one shot to make it perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to do it 3 pieces. And I was concerned with the seams, but the seams are the least of my problem.
Yeah. Anybody have any other questions for Tom? Tom, thanks so very much. I really do appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
And to everybody, hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Hope you learned something. That's what we do this for. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for coming.